Hi guys, welcome to my video on how to teach pronunciation on Cambly to Chinese students. Now, I just want to be clear that the title of this video is an absolutely huge generalization, and that obviously there is such a range of accents and languages in China that it's impossible to cover all the different pronunciation issues in one video. So I'm going to be talking very generally about some mistakes that lead to misunderstandings, which I have noticed in speakers of Mandarin, and how to give these students an entertaining lesson without hurting their self-esteem. Well, so the first thing you need to do when you observe an error is to tell the student how they can fix it. Tell them it's easy to learn the distinction between the two sounds, even though it's difficult to even hear it first. So one of the most common mistakes you'll hear in speakers of Chinese is the TH sound. So sometimes it'll come out as a L or a D sound. So instead of saying the, it'll be like L or D. And sometimes you can kind of understand, but then sometimes it can be very confusing when someone begins to speak and they're not pronouncing the TH sound correctly. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get up your minimal pairs content on Cambly. So I found it here, but when you're on your lesson, it's going to be on the right-hand side in your course content. So firstly, as suggested in the slide, you're going to pronounce the two sounds very clearly. In this case, TH and D. So th, z, th, j. Break the sound into lips, jung, tongue, and jaw posture. For example, with the TH sound, the lips are neutral, the jaw drops, and most importantly, the tongue is between the teeth. Once a student can successfully reproduce the sound on its own, you should begin to go through the minimal pairs. Depending on the student, if you feel that the student is struggling to hear the difference in the sounds, you can do a little exercise where you say random words from the list and the student can circle the sound they hear. Once you think the student can successfully distinguish between the two sounds, you should both go through the whole list together. At first, get them to listen to repeat. Then, with the second half of the exercise, you can get them to figure out the sounds by themselves. You can then reverse the previous exercise, with the student pronouncing the words and you typing what you hear. I usually do about 8 to 10 words to confirm they've really got it. Once you think the student has a grasp of the distinction, to finish a lesson, bring up a target text. Some students find real exercises really easy, whereas when it comes to pronouncing it in a real world context, they find it more difficult. And when you're doing this, keep corrections minimal. Offer lots of praise when they do get it right, because it can be really frustrating to be kind of repeating the same errors over and over again. So when they do get it right, make sure to offer a lot of praise. Another reason Chinese students and also Vietnamese often have difficulty being understood is because they fail to pronounce the end of the words. This is you find in many other speakers of English as well. When you're getting them to read an article, you'll notice that the S's and the D's at the end of words throughout the text are pretty much always dropped. So luckily this is really easy to correct because they already know the pronunciation of the sounds. They just need to be constantly reminded to add the S at the end of a word that ends with S. So simply tell them to read out loud, paying special attention to this issue, and actually do stop them every time they drop the S, and they'll learn it really quickly. It's that thing's not so difficult to teach. Other minimal pairs which Chinese students really struggle with are VF and AE, which you'll also find in the Cambly teaching materials. You can use the material the exact same way as I detailed above, going through each word, doing little exercises. And when in doubt, you can always Google for the images of the tongue and mouth position. This is really important because sometimes you're not even paying attention to it yourself, you know. And usually once Chinese students correct these three main mistakes, so the TH sound, the VF sound, and the S and D at the end of sentences, you'll hear a real improvement in the clarity of their speech. And yeah, remember not to correct too much because it is really hard coming from their language. Like, imagine us trying to learn Chinese. You know, it's a real challenge for them to learn English. And remind them that the most important thing is communication. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, the pronunciation, as long as they're communicating their points and that they're understandable. Yeah, if you have any other suggestions of minimal pairs or good content for Chinese speakers, please leave them below in the comments. And if you haven't signed up to tutor on Cambly yet, sign up at the link in the video description. Thanks so much for watching.